Hey guys, back with another video, and this one's going to be a little different in that from now on I'm actually going to be splitting these up because now I'm going to be talking about stuff that's only for 7th or only for 8th grade. This video is going to be for 7th grade and it's going to cover biomes and ecosystems. So 8th graders, your video is coming up real soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you still want to watch and learn something, by all means, but you know what's up. So I wanted to talk a little bit about biomes, ecosystems, that kind of stuff. That was what we were just about to start learning about before school closed down, and we were leading into it with the natural synthetic resources stuff. So I'm actually going to take you on a little tour of my backyard and give you a little lesson about ecosystems on the small level and on the large level. But first, I'm gonna show you something a little familiar. And voila! It's my aquarium with a little guest star from the shrimp. To give you an example of an ecosystem, let's check out my aquarium, all right? So, we have here, you can zoom in and clear. Ooh, you see all that algae on the glass. Need to clean that later. What you see here is Starjoin repens, this plant right here. And this stuff, if I can focus, is Marcellia hirsuta, and it kind of looks like clover. See the little clover leaves. We have Java fern. Oh, you see a little shrimp hanging out there too. So Java fern in the background, and these, I don't know, forgot their name, but they're pretty cool. So these are the plants inside my aquarium, and then you notice chilling out on the walls, we have these bladder snails. And then, as you saw before, that guy right there, an Amano shrimp. And then his buddies, that's a he because his tiny size. His buddies, these are Amano shrimp as well. They're bigger, so they're female. They're just chilling on my filter. So these are some of the main players in this ecosystem that I have set up in a tank. And there's a couple of others I'll talk about in just a second. So every ecosystem has levels of organization, and they all interact with each other in what you would call a food web. I mean, we used to use the term food chain, but it isn't always just in one direction. There are multiple animals and plants that are feeding each other, so it's actually more so like a tangled web rather than a single chain. So at the bottom of our food web, we have the producers, the plants. So the plants are responsible for doing photosynthesis, and you see those bubbles coming off of their leaves. Those bubbles, giving you a little time to figure it out for yourself before I tell you in 3, 2, I can't wait, it's oxygen. You're giving off oxygen. So we come over here. This little doohickey right here is pumping out carbon dioxide. And you remember our formula for photosynthesis: carbon dioxide and light goes into plants, and from that, the plants will be producing sugar and oxygen. And if we wait long enough, oh, see those little bubbles coming out from the plants? That's oxygen being produced as a byproduct of photosynthesis. Now there's another producer in here, one that I'm not as fond of. If we look over here on the glass, you see the green stuff on the glass right there, and then covering the rock, green little patches on the rocks down here. And if we zoom in a little bit, you see that hair-like stuff? That is algae. And algae does photosynthesis like plants do, but we do not, well, at least I don't like algae as much as the plants because they take nutrients away from my plants for them to grow. And algae is a perfectly fine part of any natural ecosystem. It's just as important as plants, but in my aquarium, I don't particularly like it so much, so I try to clean it out as much as possible. So these are the producers, and they are producing the sugar and the oxygen that our consumers, the snails and the shrimp, are going to be consuming in order for them to live. So the animals that are the ones eating the plants, the plant matter, those are what are called primary consumers, because they're the first ones to be getting access to those sugars. Now, if I had something like a bigger fish or crabs or something in here, those would be secondary consumers, because those animals would be going after the snails and the shrimp to eat them to get their energy. And I kind of like my little shrimp babies and my little snail babies, so I don't put any secondary consumers in here. And then in the wild, you would have even bigger fish, or maybe some birds or snakes or whatnot that eat primary consumers. You would call those secondary consumers. All right. And then at the very top of the food web, that which eats everything else would be known as probably a tertiary consumer, or the apex predator. All right. So things like hawks, eagles, jaguars, humans, those are all apex predators. They are the ones who are eating other things. They don't really get eaten by anything else. One other major part of this ecosystem is one that you can't actually see, and that's because it's bacteria. So bacteria is actually covering every single surface inside the aquarium. And if I remove this, there's bacteria that's on my little wheel here that circulates through the water. So bacteria's job is to break down decaying, rotting material and releasing those nutrients back into the environment for plants or animals to be able to use. And without bacteria, nothing would break down, and we would get just a buildup of dead stuff, which isn't really pleasant. So for my aquarium to work, we need to have the bacteria that is filtering through and breaking down things as they die, so that the other living members of this ecosystem can use those nutrients to keep on surviving. So all of that is contained within this little 10-gallon aquarium. It's complex on its own, but then you start thinking about outside forests, deserts, streams, rivers, way more complicated ecosystems. And then we get to talking about biomes, which are entire regions suited for particular plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, whatnot. And we get really, really complicated food webs. All right. So next, we're going to take a little trip outside. So, this is my backyard. Ignore the little pots and whatnot around. But we step out, and to you guys, you may just see grass and more grass, and that's about it. But even in a little patch of backyard like this, there's a really complicated little ecosystem going on. So this used to not look like this, and in fact it's still a work in progress, but it used to look like so. It's come a long way from when I first moved in here. If we look down into the ground, if we were able to peer with microscopic eyes, you will find a whole bunch of bacteria and fungi that live in the dirt itself. So as these plants are growing, they will shed off matter, old plant matter that dries up and gets into the earth. Those bacteria and fungi will break that down and release those nutrients back into the ground so that the grass and other plants growing have access to that so that they can grow even stronger. So basically all that I did here was I left it alone, because grass will go wherever it can, and I left it alone some more, and when it got tall enough I cut it down and left it alone some more. And over time you're building up those nutrients into the ground because there's that bacteria, that fungi, those decomposers that are releasing those nutrients back into the ecosystem for the plants to use. Now, if I had something like a goat, the goat would be a primary consumer eating the grass, and if there just so happened to be like a mountain lion, the mountain lion would be a secondary consumer that would be eating the goat. So another simple example of what a ecosystem would look like. So, what does all mean? Well, we've talked about natural resources, how there are renewable, non-renewable resources out there, and those resources aren't just evenly spread everywhere. You have certain kinds of resources concentrating in certain places on the earth based on, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, plate tectonics, the climate, weather. All of those factors are causing some nutrients, maybe like some phosphates or nitrates, stuff like natural gas or crude oil, to be built up in certain locations, while others, maybe like a desert, doesn't seem to have much going on. So those resources that you find in different parts of the world help define what the biome, the ecosystem looks like. So for California, a lot of the state experiences this dry period from the spring into winter, and because water is a resource that is not always in supply in these different ecosystems, the plants and animals that live and thrive here have adapted to be able to go without water for longer than things that you find in a rainforest. So the ecosystem has all these moving, working parts that are really closely intertwined with each other. And all of that is based upon these resources that are available here, maybe not so available elsewhere. And we as humans because we have pretty much absolute power and control over the destiny of our biomes, ecosystems, our planet, it is our responsibility to recognize that these resources that we rely on, we take them out of the environment, that's going to affect the ecosystems. And if we do too much harm, we can collapse ecosystems and wipe out entire species. So it's important for you guys to realize that even if it's as small as an aquarium or your backyard, there are these really complicated relationships going on everywhere, and our actions are affecting those every minute, every hour, every day. And ecosystems can change. They naturally change because maybe the climate changes, there's some sort of catastrophic event like a meteor hits or a volcanic eruption happens, or maybe it's because humans did too much and we screw up the environment. So when an ecosystem changes, the inhabitants, the organisms that live in that ecosystem, they have to change or they die. And there you can see a pattern where when something like that happens, like if we build a building but then it becomes abandoned, well, the first things that kind of reclaim it are the grasses, the little tough little shrubs and trees, and they're breaking through the concrete and cinder blocks and growing in places you never thought would be possible. And then over time, that lays down the first kind of layer of an ecosystem where now maybe other plants can take root in the newly formed soil, where it's crushed up rock and decayed plant matter that gathers up, and then it helps to break down the concrete or the rock even more. And now that you have producers, now you have consumers that can come in, grazing animals and the predators that hunt them. So, and they'll die too, and their nutrients will add to the ground as well. So over a period of 100, 1,000, 10,000 years, you get soil building up from all that plant matter and the animals that live and die there. And that supports even more complex life like trees, bigger animals, maybe like bears or eagles, and that is something that you see whenever everything gets wiped out or a whole bunch of life dies. Nature will reclaim it. Slowly but surely, nature will reclaim it. And when we're gone, that's exactly what's going to happen to us. Nature will reclaim everything that we took. Now, what we need to figure out is how can we be a better part of the ecosystem rather than standing on the outside controlling it, because with what's going around right now, there's not really a guarantee that we'll always be here. Alright? So, just thought I'd drop a little knowledge on you. So, stay safe, eat your vegetables, listen to your parents, make up your beds, and yeah. Mr. Williams, out.